Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. I am Sean Anderson, Most Valuable Podcast, and the upcoming segment is from our full Fast Break podcast that we recorded. And if you do want to check out that full podcast, head over to Blog Talk Radio /The Fast Break. You'll be able to find the full podcast over there. Let's make the transition. Let's make the transition to the NBA draft here. The 2017 NBA draft. It's coming in June. It always does. And we're going to be talking about, the players that we are most excited for and really focusing on the top five. And the top five that we're really going to be looking at is the top five from Chad Ford's big board that he just put out. So, number 1, Markelle Fultz from Washington. Number 2, Lonzo Ball from UCLA. Number 3, Giles Jackson from Kansas. 4, Malik Monk from Kentucky. And 5, Dennis Smith from NC State. Those are the 5 guys that we're mostly going to focus in on. And I think I'm going to bring in Harry Giles as well. And he kind of fell for injury reasons. But the guy that I am most excited for, and I think that we can kind of start the conversation here, and it's more of been, the way that this team's been playing in general, that they're close to being the number 1 team in the nation. Mm-hmm. It's been UCLA, because I really didn't see this coming from UCLA. I mean, I don't really know where they stood in the preseason, but I wasn't really expecting this kind of turnaround from where UCLA has been, because, since Russ, K-Love, and Drew Holiday have left, UCLA has taken a step back, at least on the national spotlight, but they have come back with a vengeance, and one of those reasons is Lonzo Ball.
Mm-hmm. Well, and not just that. I mean, last year was the year where they bring in a guy like Steve Alford to be their head coach, coming over from New Mexico. And it was kind of like last year, where his last 2 years in New Mexico were 28-7, 29-6, with a third round and a second round appearance in the NCAA tournament. And I mean, his first 2 years starts off great, Sweet 16 appearances, second, fourth in the conference. But then it was last year, which was a huge, 15-17, 6-12 in the conference, where you kind of forgot who the Bruins were. And then this year, they just come out of fire, because it's one of those where it's like, okay, Alfred's been there. They did good there, but now as we start to see him there longer, it was like, oh, is this going to be the trend now where they're going to have some bad seasons? Well, guess what? Lonzo Ball is making his case to, if he continues the play that I've seen up to this point, he could be the first overall pick in the draft come June.
I completely agree with you. I think Lonzo Ball has been a dynamic player for UCLA this year, and team on back.
Weirdest
you can't say
fucking shot I've seen, though. The weirdest over-the-body shot that I've seen. But if it goes in, that's all I care about.
That's the thing. I wonder if you think he's going to go to a shot doctor once the season ends and correct that, because are you concerned about that in the NBA at all?
If it goes in, I don't care.
Well, that's one thing too that Chad Ford and not his prospect profile is one of his weaknesses, unorthodox shooting form, and it's ridiculous. It's wonky as fuck.
If it goes in, reason,
I know, but
I'm going to go back to a guy that we talk about usually with Buddy Hield. The reason
award winner.
The reason why he fixed his shot. The reason why he fixed his shot was the ball wasn't going in. If the ball's going in, don't touch it.
Well, yeah, and
don't touch it.
It's fair. I mean, Joakim Noah has one of the weirdest shots too. I mean, he's not an efficient shooter, but I mean,
did you watch the shoot around with him and Paul George?
No. 2
guys on the court, and they're just. Paul George's like, you know what? Let's just do 3. So Paul George on one end, swish, 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 swish. To go down to Joe on the other end, just brick, bounce off the rim, whiff.
And one thing too Sean Marion was a great 3-point shooter too, and you ever see his release? He shot it from his waist. So God. I mean, obviously, it's just a concern, because if people do pick up on it defensively, they're going to realize he does shoot so weird, and it might be affecting.
It's an area, you can attack.
So I mean, it's not the traditional shooting form. So that's just one thing too. But I mean, again, it goes in. He's not my number 1 player so far, and it's still Fultz. And the reason why it is Fultz is because, yes, Lonzo Ball's getting the spotlight because his team's doing so well. And obviously Washington, I think they're sitting at 7-5 right now. They have been struggling. They haven't been able to beat big opponents. They got their doors blown off by Gonzaga. But Fultz still is carrying that team to 7-5. If Fultz isn't on that team, they might not have a win. Well, Fultz has been utterly ridiculous. And not only is he silky smooth shooting, silky smooth just on the court in general, he just looks like he can handle the pressure. And I'm not saying Lonzo Ball can't, but Lonzo Ball does have the flashiness, but Fultz is just, I feel looking at him, he is such a good player overall, and I think that he can be a true difference maker.
And this goes to a point with me about Washington's head coach when it's Lorenzo Romar, is, to me, I see him as he's a guy, great recruiter, can find the guys like Markelle Fultz, but it's one of those things where I look at him and I go, you're a recruiter, not a great basketball coach when it comes to X's and O's. And this is a Washington team where you're going to see where it's like, oh, you know what? Fultz is great and he's going to be a top pick. But the Huskies aren't going to do anything this year.
And one thing, I know people are going to jump down your throat the way you say Fultz because Ricky likes reading.
I corrected it.
You said Fultz again.
Yeah, I know. I corrected it though.
I'm just putting it out there because you might make a Fultz again.
I corrected it.
No, I know, but you might do it again. I'm just saying.
I caught myself.
I'm just saying that if he does make the mistake, he knows it's Fultz. Ricky likes to read names differently. I mean, he can't say a lot of words right. But yes, Fultz. It can't kind of hurt him for the team that he's on because that team wouldn't be 7-5 without him. And I look at him as a very dynamic player, not only a great shooter, not only has great vision, he's very active, very athletic. He's a guy that's not going to be afraid to do and go out and make plays.
And he's got all the size in the world too.
And 6'5" for a point guard. So I mean, he's small too. So that's one thing where he weighs the same amount as a guy like Malik Monk who's playing shooting guard. But Malik Monk's 6'3", so that's a guy that I worry about more with size because he's going to be a 6'3" shooting guard. That's kind of worrisome the way his size is, and I don't really see him as a point guard. I see him as a scorer.
Yep.
With Fultz, really is I see him as a dynamic player, and kind of Russell Westbrook has kind of broken the mold for point guards where you don't need to be the small
talent.
guy. Yeah, I think that's really what it is. Is he's a guy that I'm not saying his player comparison is Russell Westbrook because Russ is just an ungodly freak, but just the size, his build, he might even be more of a Michael Carter Williams, but good.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, if we're throwing around names here, I would prefer to be called Ross rather than Michael Carter Williams. But no, you're right, and that's the thing. He is an athletic freak, and like in baseball, you call him a 5-tool player. Like he has everything he needs to be a successful NBA player. And when you watch the game log, like he passes the eye test by far. When you watch him out on the court, you're like, that guy's gonna be a stud in the NBA. Everything he does out there. He knows what he's doing. He sees everything on the court that's going on, and he runs that offense like he's a senior, which is just bizarre sometimes because the kid's like 18 still. Mm-hmm. It's just he's one of the best players in college basketball, but the question is always going to be like, well, do you want to go him or are you thinking Josh Jackson or, you go big?
Well, looking at this, and
there's not many of them this year. That's a concern.
Yeah, and that is a concern. And really looking at it, I mean, it's a very guard-heavy draft, which we haven't seen in a while. You have Fultz, you have Ball, you have Malik Monk, you have Dennis Smith, all those guys in the top 5. And looking at it, the guys that really stick out for me, and Malik Monk's a guard too. I forget if I mentioned him, but looking at Josh Jackson, the reason why right now my top 5 is Fultz, Ball, and those are close ones too. Because I mean, Ball's been absolutely phenomenal. I can't say that he's not been ridiculous. So it goes Fultz, Ball. Then I am putting a guy in Harry Giles at 3 because I know obviously 2 torn ACLs and two ACL problems. That's very worrisome. But the need for a big man and a need for a guy that can really change the game and kind of plays like Chris Webber. Yeah, I'm gonna want to take him, and if he can really prove to me that injuries aren't a problem, like kind of Joel Embiid has done so far, and just at least injury-wise, that's going to take away my worrisome. Then I got Malik Monk, and then I have Josh Jackson because he's very similar to a guy like Jaylen Brown who cannot shoot to save his damn life from beyond the arc.
This is a thought I just had just to go off of Dave saying like there's not a bunch of like big men in this draft. 2 guys that I think of though that we probably should have seen last year, but right before the deadline for whether you're going to be in or out said, hey, I'm going to come back and actually forego the draft. We got guys like Rab and Thomas Bryant, who those were 2 guys center and then power forward / center, where the question that I'm thinking are these 2 guys that, I mean, Ford's got them low in my standards on the draft boards where like you see Rab at 16 and then Bryant down, 26? Are these guys where they're going to say, fuck, I should have came out last year?
But for good reason. I mean, Thomas Bryant was still in that range, and Rob has dropped. I mean, both in his play and stock because he was projected around
saying
top 10.
This year, shit, I should have came out last year.
Well, maybe, but I mean,
shouldn't have came back.
I'm not really focused on those guys right now because I'm more focused on...
They're in a different level. Yeah. I mean, it sounds mean, but it's like, look, Ivan Robb is a completely different level than a Josh Jackson and Harry Giles.
We had him pretty high, though, last year.
We had him at top 10. But the reason why he has fallen is because he hasn't made an improvement. You look at him and he just looks like the same player.
You come back to college and you're a year older. You've got all the muscle. You've got all the experience. You should be dominating all these freshmen coming in, and you're not showing that. And Sean's exactly right. You haven't impressed us by by living up and outperforming yourself last year.
That's the thing. Last year is, he hasn't improved on what his knocks were last year. It's like not even like he's just really the same player as he was last year. So if we saw an improvement and even a slight improvement, then maybe I would be more hesitant. But it's kind of like, Melo Trimble, where you see a guy as a freshman who's, oh my God, this guy's crazy, but then he doesn't declare. And then you see from sophomore, junior, senior year, he just falls completely flat. And I feel like Rob's going that trajectory. And then with Thomas Bryant, he's just not a guy that's athletic. He's a guy that's very powerful. He's a guy with a big motor. But I see him as more like a Jawan Blair. He's a guy that's not going to, really...
He's not going to change the game for you.
He's not going to change the game, exactly. So, but the guys that are going to change the game, Fultz, Ball, Giles, Monk, Jackson, Dennis Smith,
Fox.
Jason Tatum, De'Aaron Fox. Which guy outside of Fultz and Ball really has you excited?
It's Monk.
Monk. Yeah.
Monk is a stud. And you know what? I'll give you the weirdest thing that I like about him. Dude shot 1 from 9 against Louisville. Loved it. Because you know what? He never lost confidence in his shot. He
wanted the last shot.
He took the last shot that they had.
But he wanted it. He
exactly,
didn't just take it. He wanted that last shot.
That's the thing. It's that instinct. And I hate saying it, but he's starting to kind of get that feel for like a killer instinct. And, the old Kobe quote where it's like, a guy goes out there, he starts off the night 0 for 10, maybe he'll quit at like 11. Shooting. He just keeps shooting and be like, shit, if I'm not shooting 20, then I'm not trying. Like, I think that's what I'm starting to see a little bit out of Malik Monk. He has that will to win. He definitely is the most explosive player when it comes to, this is a guy who can light up. He shot, a ridiculous amount. He went for 47 against UNC. And then the next night, like I said, he went 1 from 9, still got 16 points, but definitely disappointing performance against Louisville, which was one of the most scouted games early this year. So he is a guy who is going to be a game changer in the NBA. I see huge things for him because what I see is totally different from what we saw out of, honestly, this past year's draft class, which has been really underperforming in the NBA.
See, but one thing, and the reason why I kind of shy away from Malik Monk and why he is lower, he's still a top 5 player in my mind. I think he could still be an effective scorer, but the reason why I have him lower is because of his size. Because, yes, he has this killer instinct in college, but he's more athletic than the players he's going up against. He has the quickness to get by these players, but when he's going up against in the NBA guys, these guys are going to have similar athletic ability, and he might not have the size to go up against them.
And I was going to throw out, is 6'3" kind of a little, short for him? Would you rather him be a little taller?
Well, if
ideally everyone would be like 6'7", but
yeah,
come on, that's just not going to happen.
Jimmy Butler.
Ricky, I've been banking on a growth spurt since high school, and I still haven't hit it. I've been 5'7" since 8th grade. But the thing is with a guy like Malik Monk is 6'3". I don't see him as a point guard. I see him as a scorer.
No, he's definitely doesn't have the instincts to be a point.
He's not a guy who's going to be a flashy, a guy who's going to light up assist numbers. He's not going to be a guy that's going to be, flashy passes. A guy like Lonzo Ball, Fultz, they have that knack to be a point guard. But
he can be a shooting guard.
He did have some assists one night.
But he doesn't have the size to be.
One night.
He doesn't really have the size to be a shooting guard. I mean, 6'3", 185. I don't see that as a shooting guard at all. I really look at him and I see I see a point guard's body, but he's not a 2, at least in the NBA. I just don't see that he can be a guy that will succeed scoring-wise at the level he currently is and be able to translate into the NBA as successfully. I think he could still be an effective NBA player, but I don't think he can be a guy who's going to be a star.
And I don't want to come off like over the top on this, but when we look at players and their builds and like height, weight, wingspan, all of that crap, sometimes with some talent, you can just throw it out the window because it doesn't matter. You got a guy who's 5'8" in Little Isaiah who's just murdering everybody in the NBA right now. He's one of the quickest players in the game. And AI did the same thing. And there's so many players who are exceptions to the rule now. And I feel like just saying
Drew Brees in the NFL.
Your ideal shooting guard may not be 6'3", but he can chuck the ball up there. And I hate the term chucker because it's got negative connotations. And he does do it sometimes, but he will go out there and he could be a special player. He could just be, another exception to he's not ideal, but man, does he kill it for us.
But one thing, though, is both of those guys are bigger guys. I'm sorry, both of those guys, and Isaiah and AI, they're point guards, and they had the natural feel of a point guard. Where Malik Monk, he's labeled as a shooting guard, and you look at shooting guards these days, he's going to go up against a guy like DeMar DeRozan who's like 6'7". I mean, this guy's lanky as fuck. I mean, you go up against a guy like James Harden, he's 6'5". He's got the length. The guy that and Bradley Beal too. You think of Bradley Beal as a small shooting guard. Bradley Beal's very similar, at least, to James Harden. So I don't see a guy that he can really go up against, at least size-wise, and a guy like that is Lou Williams. Lou Williams could score like crazy. He's 6'1", but Lou Williams is a small player out there, and he's not a starter because of his size. And I think that Malik Monk might fall into that. I'm not saying Malik Monk is going to struggle,
probably a
but
good comparison. Yeah.
I think that's a very dangerous thing when you're looking at a player that he doesn't have that size, because Fultz, Ball, 6'5", look like fluent guys at their current position. And if they, I don't know if they can move to the two, but the fact that they have been able to play at such a high level at the one in college, I think that they would be able to translate that over into the NBA. So let's
flip it over to the other Kentucky guard then and talk about Fox, because he's got better size.
High on him?
Well,
I'm higher than I expected to be.
One thing I want to mention just on Monk, just to kind of close before you go to Fox, was some guards that are in shooting guards right now that are a little bit undersized. James Harden, 6'5", so a little bit taller than where Monk is, but still shorter than you'd like.
And bigger. James Harden's a muscle
freak. You've got C.J. McCollum,
the kid's 18, 19.
who is only an inch taller than Monk, and then D. Wade, who came in at 6'4". So these are guys that are around the same height coming in, and weight and build is a thing that you can fix. It's the heightness, I know it's what you're born with, but you can get stronger and add that strength in the NBA.
Well, who was the second name you threw out there in between D. Wade?
C.J. McCollum.
C.J. McCollum. Okay, but that's a guy that I think that's a fairly good comparison. He was a guy that did play point guard, though, at Lehigh. He was a guy that was a point guard. He was a guy that moved over because
D. Wade was
Dame.
a guy in college who the ball was in his hands at Marquette.
But that wasn't. He wasn't a point guard. He was just all right. Get the ball to D. Wade.
But the ball was in his hands.
Oh yeah, no. But I think D. Wade's kind of in that same range of a Malik Monk, just because he's so damn dynamic.
Except Monk has a slightly better shot coming out of college at this point.
Wade was more athletic.
And that's the thing. It was just the fact that the best player has the ball in their hands, and with a team like Kentucky, they can't necessarily do that all the time because they are always going to reload and have the top talent.
Yeah, and one thing, again, I want to make sure, Monk's still in my top 5. I think he's good. Just the one thing that gives me, Ball and Fultz don't have that big weakness that I see like a guy like Malik Monk, but a guy that does have weaknesses. And since it is such a guard-heavy draft, you obviously brought in De'Aaron Fox, and we'll get to him a little bit later. Sure. We can't have this too long because it's just a brief thing, but it's glad that we're giving people a little bit of a bait, and we'll reel him in for later draft talk, because this isn't going to slow down. We also have Dennis Smith too, who I'm high on, and who has that point guard size and can be, we really don't have to worry about him staying at a point guard. But the guys that I want to talk about are Harry Giles, Giles Jackson, and then we'll just throw out some names after. But a guy with Harry Giles, he's probably the best forward, at least traditional power forward, in this draft, but he hasn't been getting the playing time since he is coming off ACL injuries that he suffered in high school his senior year. So one thing that he might have a lot of value to a team, and you look at a team like LA, if they get their top 3 pick, they're not going to go with a guy like Fultz or Ball. Well, they might be hesitant to go with a guy like Fultz or Ball. I'm not going to say that if you're going to pass up a guy like those. But a team that needs a big man, they're going to have to look at Giles, and they're also going to have to look at Josh Jackson, who fits that small forward role, but I don't think he fits that kind of that role of the new point forward. So looking at Giles and Jackson, which guy gives you more concern?
I think it's got to be Harry. I mean, the double injury is just that's a lot to invest in a player. I know he has all the God-given talent in the world, and he's got the size, the weight, like wingspan, 7'3" wingspan's ridiculous. But it doesn't matter if you're not going to be on the court, and we haven't seen enough of him yet. Look, he's missed out on.
We haven't seen anything from him yet.
5 minutes. But we saw five whole minutes out of him.
So we haven't seen anything from him yet.
He had nothing in those 5. No. It's all right, and it's hard to say. So purely off of what I've seen so far and knowing that the injury concern is there, I'm going to lean towards Josh Jackson. And you already listed the concern for that kid. He can't shoot. He's purely going to go into the paint and try to draw contact. He needs to clean up his free throw shooting, but look, he is going to be he's going to be a successful player in the NBA. Mm-hmm. I think he's a little high right now. I'm not as high on him as everyone else is. I don't believe Josh Jackson is going to be the stud out of this class. And again, I think he's only so high because we're at a lack of options when it comes to, legit power forwards, because look, the top 1, Harry, is injury prone now. And after that, it's kind of like, Jason Tatum, you could go Josh Jackson, you could go, there's a list of guys who are just Nobody really does it for me right now.
Yeah, and at least coming from a forward perspective, I mean, really, Harry Giles is only the true guy who can be a big man. I think he's the only guy in the top 10 that's over 6'11". I think Josh Jackson's 6'8",
yep.
and Tatum's not even. I think Tatum's around 6'8" too. Tatum's not that big. So looking at this, and I think maybe Jonathan Isaac from FSU is bigger as well. But looking at this, yeah, Jonathan Isaac 6'11". But really, the guy that I have more concern over is Josh Jackson, because
I'd say so too.
You look at Giles, and I know that you have the injury problems
with
here.
Giles when he comes back. And of course, the biggest question mark will always be health, but he's going to be the best player out there when he's healthy. It's going to be boom. That's the best big man in this draft.
We'll have to see. I mean, he's going to have to not only deal with Grayson Allen, who's obviously having his own troubles, but when he comes back,
I want to get to him before we end this.
You'll be able to throw out names after. But when we're done with this conversation, but with Duke, you have Kennard, who's obviously playing lights out. You have Grayson Allen, who's a guy who expects to have the ball in his hands. Tatum's obviously a guy who's consistently scoring. Those are three guys there that have been there this season. It's going to be weird to see how Giles kind of pushes himself into this role here at Duke. And I think that if Josh Jackson just shows a spark of what he was kind of promised as a long, lanky, athletic power forward, I think that's going to increase his value, whether the injury problems are there, whether he plays a ton of minutes, just because you are so thin, at least when you look at that forward position. I think that's the reason why. And then with Jackson, yes, he's super athletic. Yes, he's so quick and he can get to the lane. He doesn't have that fear of going to the lane. But it's my same ones with Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown's kind of been exercising those problems I've had with him so far, because he's been able to get to the hoop. He's been able to, kind of use his size and use his lankiness to get to the hoop. And his 3-point shot has been terrible in the NBA. So
they're smart in limiting his minutes. I like the way they're going with his development.
But that's one thing with Josh Jackson. You're going to have to slow his development. With Giles, you might have to slow his development of injuries, but as long as if he's able to come out and play 20 minutes for Duke and not have any of those injury problems, then I think those kind of go by the wayside with how much need there is for a big man in this draft. So
Process.
That's just my thoughts there.
Well, and mine too is with Josh Jackson. It's more so about the team he plays on. Kansas to me is not the same Kansas that we saw when it was them going up against Anthony Davis in the championship game. This is a Kansas team that usually it's like, okay, we get through non-conference play, we'll win the Big 12, but then when you get to tournament time, it's whatever can go wrong will go wrong. And one of these things is he might be the best player there. I mean, Mason the third is outscoring him right now currently, but it's one of those things where it's like, let's see what happens when Giles is healthy and then compare the two at the end.
And one thing, too, obviously Kansas is dealing with Carlton Bragg's situation. And
is so much potential that we had for him coming into the season.
And you're also dealing with Aduko. I'm going to mess up this name, but Aduko's, I think just Bill Self called him U on post game against UNLV. They're dealing with him being out for the season now. So obviously Kansas is having some struggles, but I think Josh Jackson, more of a player, it's just more of can he shoot in the NBA, because that is coming at such a premium. And if you're a small forward that can't shoot, I mean, obviously, guys like LeBron James, guys like Michael Jordan didn't have to deal with that. I know Michael Jordan was a shooting guard.
Was a different era too.
But still, I mean, Michael Jordan couldn't shoot to save his life when coming into the NBA. Same with LeBron. But one thing about Josh Jackson, he's not LeBron or Michael Jordan.
Yeah, so he's not a generational athlete. That's
one thing that's going to get me into trouble. We're hitting an hour mark, so just real quick, guys, throw out names that we haven't got to that aren't in the top 10 that intrigue you as a players.
Quinn Snyder, and mainly he's getting on the map for me because of that game he played against Kentucky. This is a guy who early on was a bit inconsistent, but then later on, 15-13, he played Texas Southern and Eastern Kentucky. I hope you can score some points. But then going up against Kentucky, getting a 3-point win, 37 minutes, shooting 52% from the field, getting 22 points. I am curious to see how he plays and Louisville does in the ACC conference schedule.
I'm tossing out Luke Kennard. I think that early on he's lit it up, and he's the biggest thing he's done to make himself valuable is improve his 3-point shooting. Out of Duke, I think he's going to be a fantastic pickup. He'll be later in the draft unless he does something I mean, look, you're already on Duke, so you're going to get that media coverage. I just feel like he's outshined by a couple guys in this draft, but I feel like he's going to go in the 15 to 25 range and be very valuable for one of these teams.
And my guy is kind of in that same place of Luke Kennard, where he's outshined by younger guys. And we consistently see this in the draft, that guys who do have experience are going to fall just because of their age. Really the only outsider of that has been Buddy Hield, and because of his crazy performance, and a guy that will, kind of, be that Buddy's performance so far, that might worry a little some NBA teams. But the guy that I am really interested in is a senior out of Villanova, Josh Hart, who is ridiculous. I think Josh
was one
Hart
of the main reasons why they won last year.
Well, the thing with Josh Hart is, this guy is just great all around. I don't have any problems with him, and he's very similar to me, at least.
But he's not a top pick.
To Malcolm Brogdon. But that's the thing, is a guy like Malcolm Brogdon, look at the performance he's having so far already on Milwaukee.
He's one of the best performing rookies in the league.
He is a guy that he comes in because, and he succeeds because he's not banking on athleticism. He's just banking on talent. And Josh Hart isn't a guy that's going to blow you out of his water with a specific skill, but he's just a great overall player.
I'm sorry, I don't know who Malcolm Brogdon. You didn't use his proper name, so
the president.
Thank you,
Malcolm Brogdon. You're obnoxious.
The man who just posterizes LeBron.
If he has a nickname, especially after posterizing LeBron, let's put some respect on that name.
And Kyrie, but really, a guy like Josh Hart, I think it will be a total sleeper in this draft. I think he'll go late, and honestly, the Spurs will probably pick him up, and then you'll have another superstar. Because the thing with Josh Hart is the fact that he is just so overall good. And it's a guy that he's not going to impress you with flashy dunks, but he's just going to be a guy that can get work done. And in the NBA, if you're going late and you're able to bring that to a team like, say, Cleveland, San Antonio, God forbid the Warriors, Josh Hart's going to be a stud. And I think that's just one thing that I wanted to throw out there. And obviously there's other guys that we didn't talk about, but if you are wanting a little more of that talk, we'll be bringing more draft talk to you.
Well, one guy I wanted to kind of close out with, and this is more of a tease for what Brandon and I are going to do on the Primetime Podcast this week. I want to get your guys' snaps on this because they're going to get enough of mine on the Primetime Podcast. What do you guys think of Grayson Allen right now? And what it plays for him into his draft stock. Because like I said, you guys are going to hear enough of me on Monday after Christmas talk about this.
I can't wait to hear you and Brandon on this, by the way, just before I get into it. Nothing's changed for me about Grayson Allen. He is an extremely passionate kid who has problems with getting too emotional in the game. Obviously he flared out and, was extremely upset at the call. I think he was more upset at himself than the call. Like, he's done this ticky-tack bullshit throughout his whole college career. The head bobs, all of this shit, trying to trip people. Like, he's I'll do anything to win a game guy. And we've seen that be extremely valuable in the NBA, but it's not someone you're going to go up and drop a high draft pick on. But he's still a guy who's been around in college for a couple of years. He went back, he saw his draft stock, and was like, you know what? I'm going to go back one more year. It probably doesn't help him because of all this national media coverage on his play, but he's still going to be an average player in college. In
the pros?
No, I'm saying he's an average player in college.
Oh.
He's above average in college, but he'll be, slightly average for a bench player in the pros, and he'll give you good minutes. He reminds me a little bit, the dirtiness that you need out of like a Dunleavy or Dellavedova. Like, he gives you that little bit because he'll do something that kind of makes you go, I hate that fucking piece of shit. But if he's on my team, like, great play.
Well, that's the thing.
You got in their heads.
Last year, we consistently compared him to J.J. Redick because people hated him.
That's a dream.
People hated him, but the reason why people compared him was just because he was a white kid from Duke.
Yep.
And J.J. Redick didn't have the problems that Grayson Allen's currently having.
No.
My thoughts was last year, I think I consistently had him slotted in at number 25 overall to the Los Angeles Clippers because they needed shooting help. And the one thing with that was, I think I did with the Clippers. It was some team that needed help there. Maybe no, they had Bembry. I'm blanking here, but he was usually in the later 20s.
Yep.
And I think the kind of headline you could say that is Grayson Allen is pretty much the poster for white privilege. He's a kid that's going to whine when he does something wrong because he didn't get the right call for himself, even though he's not going to take responsibility for his actions. And Coach K's, it's okay, my son's fine. It's the kid that's going to go to Toys R Us. You brought this up early. He's going to knock shit off the shelves, and then he's going to be like, I didn't do that. And his mom's like, oh, that's my kid. Don't hurt his kid. He didn't do anything wrong. He's a saint.
Just to throw it out, I listened to me and Brandon talk about, is Grayson Allen a dirty player last year when he tripped guys?
Yep.
I compared him to Christian Laettner. That's why I compared him to.
But Leitner stomped somebody.
He's the Leitner
Leitner's-
of this.
But
of
he was
this
also
Duke
tough.
team.
So
Leitner was tough. Leitner stopped on someone, and Leitner had a swagger to himself.
Like
I think Grayson Allen has a kind of pettiness to himself.
Yeah.
He's a mean girl.
Like my thought was, wait a few years when we see the I hate Grayson Allen 30 for 30.
No, he won't do that because he won't have the same
unless they
recognition.
win. Unless they win, and it's
he
on
wills
his back.
them. Yeah. I mean, Christian.
Kind of already did his freshman
Leitner earned
year.
it because he was like a top overall pick. He absolutely killed it in college. Grayson Allen isn't that guy. He's not a top pick. He's not going to go out there and be on the dream team.
And that was one thing too.
He could be the last one because Jordan hates someone.
That was one thing too with this is he was slated for Naismith Player of the Year. I mean he was like the front runner coming into this, and this isn't actions of someone who should be winning an award.
shouldn't award him for anything.
You need to be a leader out there, and yes, Leitner was he was a scumbag in college, but one thing he had a swagger to himself. He had a thing where he wasn't going to get pushed around. People saw him as a pretty boy, but people didn't. He didn't care. He had a swagger to himself. I look at Grayson Allen. I see a whiny white kid who got his way all throughout his life, and he wants it again. He wants it there, and that's what I said. But I'll see what you and Brandon have to say on the
It's
Primetime
like the
podcast.
tweet I retweeted that someone took the reaction of him throwing the temper tantrum and said, "Man, when your mom gets you the wrong color of Mercedes for your Sweet 16."
Exactly, and that's what I see here is just a kid who isn't getting his way, and I don't think it's going to really affect his draft stock, but it's
nothing new. That's the thing.
I think he's going to be a second rounder just because of the youth that's coming in and players like Josh Hart that you don't have this problem with, and he's a leader and he's a winner. I think that's going to be the reason why Grayson Allen falls out from where he possibly could have been a first rounder. Now he's going to be a second rounder. But anyways, that's going to wrap up this episode of the Fast Break Podcast. Do not forget to tune into the Primetime Podcast where Ricky and Brandon will be going in depth about Grayson Allen. But we talk draft, we talk Lakers, we talk Kings. Dave, thank you so much for joining us. Ricky, thank you so much for joining us. And of course, we got to thank our listeners, the people who make this happen. Thank you for downloading on Blog Talk Radio if you did it through that way. Thank you if you're listening on YouTube. We always love and respect that you guys do that. Don't forget to share this stuff if you like it. Don't forget to come back if you liked it even more. And also, got to throw out a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to all of you guys. Even if you call us dumbasses in the comments, we still appreciate you that you're taking the time to do that for us. But for Ricky Widmer and Dave Oster, I'm Sean Anderson. We'll see you next week. Thank you. Oh, shit. Oh, it's just one of our videos scared me a little bit. Don't forget to check out that one. And also don't forget to check out patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast. But thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.